Okay, everyone can see the thing?
Yep.
All right, awesome. Well, hello, nerds. I'm P.S. Briggy. I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Central Florida, and this is my talk, The Ludoarsonist Playground, Doom Clocking, and the Ends of the Table. I'm so glad to be sharing this here because it was actually at last year's Generation Analog during a Q&A that I was given a question about positioning queerness within the transphobic logics of Dungeons & Dragons. And in response, I said somewhat offhandedly that I was disinterested in conciliatory fixes to D&D and that, quote, I'm coming to see myself as a kind of ludo-arsonist. And the chat had quite a bit of fun with that term and even coerced me into putting it into my Twitter bio. But now, a year later, surprise, it's not just a bit. It's actually become the cornerstone of my dissertation work on unraveling game systems through play. So a quick overview. There are two ways we might read ludo-arsony. Firstly, it is to burn the game, to liberate play from fixed categories and from the game's own bounded materiality. We're going to be talking about this a lot today, setting your games on fire. Yet it can also be read as ludo-arson, to play with fire, to find play in the burning, unmediating, and unplaying of games. So to broadly summarize, I'm interested in play that makes the game no longer a game, what we might call the unplayable. We might take joy in the ash and burnt cardboard. We might become a new kind of player, become ludo-arsonists. So with that, I have some bad news. The end of gaming is upon us. And to be fair, this is far from the first time. Gaming, it seems, is always ending, and gamers are always mourning its loss. Casualization, the rise of mobile games, DRM software, the satanic panic, microtransactions, Fortnite, inflation, scapegoating for gun violence, emulation, loot boxes, and of course, Gamergate, we might lose count of all the times that gaming has met its tumultuous end. And Catherine Cross, in her excellent analysis of Gamergate, describes the gamer's disposition towards melodramatic doomsaying and existential panic as a terror dream. As she writes, gamer love must be a reactive thing, forever under outside threat. Protecting against these threats or opposing them has become part of the very practice of being a gamer. And this is not unique to video games. Last year, I talked about reactionary movements within the D&D fandom and how Ernie Gygax provoked a wave of toxic messaging after making claims that old school players were being run out of tables for being old-fashioned and not understanding gender identity. And Gygax's bitter lamentations, his faux reluctant defensiveness, and his fantastical nostalgia are all part and parcel of the terror dream of gaming. Such is the tragedy of the capital G gamer, a life of bitter, grim-faced vigilance against the swirling threat of the inevitable. But maybe, just maybe, the end of gaming isn't a bad thing. A couple of months ago, popular gaming magazine Polygon tweeted an article with the tagline, "The opposite of grimdark is hope punk, and tabletop RPGs are leading the way forward to a more optimistic future for the hobby and humanity." And in response to the article, however, Brazilian TRPG designer Wendy Yu tweeted a thread of frustrations about her game's inclusion under the label of hope punk. Yu noted that this was a mischaracterization of their work, as what is often described as hope punk plays into, quote, a bourgeois escapist fantasy that trades an actual understanding of our context for an empty vibe of wholesomeness, tenderness, kindness, and shit like that. As they went on to argue, we don't need hope punk's type of hope in our grim dark times. We need to burn the world down because we hope whatever we build in the ashes is not just a rehash of what came before. That's what my game is about. The end of the world is a good thing, the beginning of something else. And what Yu describes here is a sharp articulation of what gender radical and abolitionist feminists have been saying for some time. First is that hope is a promissory techno-utopian tool that encourages somnolence and ignores material conditions. Trans scholars, for example, have pointed out that the "it gets better" narrative used by gay suicide prevention charities circumvent the reality that it only gets better for some, and its passivity suggests that one might wait patiently for this always oncoming betterment. Instead, feminist scholars have articulated experiences of an active longing that is also an ushering in of the world after this one. And so our question then becomes, how do we find, as Hill Malatina writes, a way of making space to think, to be in worlds that are unlivable, but that one must nevertheless persist to exist within? And this is my project here, to find life in the unlivable and to find play in the unplayable. If reactionary gaming fandoms are rife with doomsayers, then ludo-arsonists might be called the doom bringers. The ludo-arsonist not only embraces but ushers in the end, unsealing the seals, sparking the fire, and pressing every big red button that might hurry this thing along until it's all ablaze. Marquise Bay argues that taking hold of the world through the dictates of Black trans feminism, in effect, ends the world in order to claim the world, a world emerging from the rubble of this one anew in order for something that used to be us to live. The Ludo-arsonist seeks the end of gaming for the same reasons they seek the end of gender, to liberate play from the grip of these twin phantoms. Their feminist position comes from their role as a celebrant of the apocalypse. So with that, let's find our matches. I first started studying burning games over a year ago while working on a paper about the Mork Borg community. And for those who don't know, it's a Swedish death punk role-playing game that takes place in a despairing sludge metal utopia. Sorry, dystopia. But what I'm interested in is its unique endgame mechanic. In Mork Borg, every dawn the player rolls to see if the world draws closer to its inevitable end. And anytime a 1 is rolled, a new prophetic misery of the apocalypse is unleashed upon the earth. And once the 7th misery is rolled, well, the world ends, all of the characters die, the game and your lives end here. Burn the book. And that might be read as hyperbole, but it isn't. Fans frequently share photos and videos of the burning text. And as I wrote last year, while this might seem like a marketing scheme to get folks to buy more copies of the book, the ritualistic burning of the Mork Borg text can actually be read as a political act. Dungeon crawler TRPGs and fantasy genres, especially those in D&D's ludic genealogy, are often associated with costly books and rules lawyering. But Mork Borg playfully diminishes the significance of its own rules by inviting players to set it on fire. What happens when a game is made unplayable through burning? When the material reality, the coded nature, the textness, the authority, and the binding propensity of the ludic system is unraveled through burning. The game isn't gaming anymore when it's been burned away, but play lingers amidst the fire. Play is the fire. So let's turn to another example. Stephen Dewey's tragic horror game 10 Candles is its own take on ludo-arsony, as it is a game that one plays by burning. I try to run it for my friends once a year around Halloween. We sit in a dark room around a flame-proof bowl and the titular 10 candles. This time around, I'm facilitating one of the book's classic scenarios. Characters have been hiding in a small bunker and decide to venture to an observatory in rural Oregon, where they last heard of other survivors. Before the game begins, I pass my phone around to players who take turns recording in-character messages about setting out. In 10 Candles, characters are made by writing their traits down on note cards and burning away these features to alter the fiction. The game consists of 10 scenes, the next scene beginning whenever a candle goes out. 10 Candles then facilitates a deliberate playing into darkness as the story becomes increasingly grim as characters come to face their inevitable ends. And players know from the get-go that their characters will die. In fact, this is one of the rules that Dewey is relatively hard-fisted about. It's not about whether the characters fall to the darkness or emerge as survivors. There are no survivors, not here. Everyone will die in the final scene without question or quarrel. 10 Candles guides play towards the moment after the game is over. At the start of each scene, as the GM, I lead the players in a ritual. I begin, "These things are true. The world is dark." And the players take turns going around the scene and setting truths about the game before responding together, "And we are alive." We play out the scenes of the characters' misadventure. Eventually, they make their way to an observatory and break inside to find it empty, but not entirely empty. And as the final candle flickers on the table, all of us know what's about to happen. One player immediately, dramatically sacrifices her character to save another survivor, granting that player a hope die. Another of my players is still trying to problem solve his way out of the inevitable. In the end, the survivor who received the hope die is the last one alive. She tries to hide and fails her role. And as the candle is snuffed and she perishes, the room falls into darkness. I then say my part. These things are true. The world is dark. But this time there is no speaking back. There are no truths. Instead, I discreetly press play on my phone and begin the recording. The voices of these characters now lost to us, their virtues and vices and moments and brinks burnt to ash in a bowl on the table in my friend's living room. Play again. I hope you can hear.
This is Gregory Bly. December 22nd, 2019. Results have been inconclusive at this station, and we're beginning to run out of resources. It's been decided that we'll move on, God knows where. I hope it'll make a difference. Maybe. This is stupid. I'm done.
I think we might be the last ones. The very last ones. And I don't want that to be true, so if you're listening to this, we tried.
The recorded voices are at once familiar and not. We hear these characters and know that they are not the same as they were when these messages were captured, nor are we the same players. And as the recording ends the game, 10 Candles is over, and a radical, devastating play, the sitting together in the darkness of it, erupts from the ashes. The unspoken words, "and we are alive," linger in the smoky air unuttered. As Dewey states in the guidebook, let them have that silence. This moment is what 10 Candles is all about. We sit in the moment after. The characters are dead, the story is done, and we are left with ash and the dark. And the silence hangs over us until one of my friends shakes their head and says, well, fuck, what should we play now? Both 10 Candles and Mork Borg then represent burning games as a means of playing with the end. They invite a mournful reveling in the destruction, in the anticipation of the unmaking, morose and gleeful, as players cast their characters piece by piece into fire and post videos of their burning source books. This celebratory knowing that the burning is coming marks an orientation towards unending play. To quote Bay again, so burn it all, there's the gender we want. And here I'd say, burn it all, there's the game we want. At the end of the burned game, what we have left is the play, momentarily gameless, of sitting in the quiet dark together, feeling things together, holding and witnessing each other. This isn't hope punk, this is ludo-arsony. And as the final words of the final song of Mork Borg's nameless scriptures intone, all praise the fire which burns all, and the darkness shall swallow the darkness. I really wish we had a little more time to talk about these things, but I made a mistake and pitched a 12,000 word dissertation chapter as a 15-minute talk. But speaking of wishes, there is one last thing I want to leave you with. There's a practice I'm fond of in role-playing games called Stars and Wishes, a role-playing ritual that belongs to no game, though many make use of it. The premise is that at the end of each session of play, the player grants a star to another player, shouting out a moment they really enjoyed, and each player makes a wish, something they hope to see in a future session. I bring up Stars and Wishes to highlight a practice made exemplary in role-playing games, taking time when the game is over to slip into the meta and become for a moment people observing and longing together. While Stars and Wishes is regarded as a safety tool and might be seen as merely facilitatory, granting stars and making wishes is also play and a kind of aftercare in Malatino's sense. We might imagine it and the practices I've articulated here of burning games and welcoming the end as doing the work of afterworld care, small hints at how we might keep living and playing in the world ablaze. So, in conclusion, set your games on fire. This is the play the Ludoarsonist is after. This is why the game and its attending logics, its bits of wood and cardboard and plastic, its collateral technocultural encampments, its corporocratic institutions, and its ontologizing systems all must burn. Gaming's defensiveness, its terror dream, imagines that play stops when the game stops. But this is a lie. The end of gaming is here, and when it's all been burned, and the game is truly over and these fires clear, we'll still be here under the stars, playing and wishing and living for the world we might make in the ashes of the game after. Play that holds our words unuttered in the air in mutual assurance, and we are alive. Thank you all so much for listening and for being so hype in the chat. Here's my email and my Discord handle because Twitter is dead. And as a subtle note, I'm going on the job market this year. So if you want me to come to your department and set games on fire, send me a note.